So this is for Forensics, Chapter 3, which is now Fingerprints. Part 1 is about the history of fingerprints. So first off, the official word for the study of fingerprints is called dactyloscopy, and it comes from two Greek words. First off, dactylos, which means finger, and scopian, which means to examine. So dactyloscopy is to examine the fingerprint, therefore the study of it. And a fingerprint officially is called a dactylogram, defined as an impression left on any surface that consists of a pattern made by the friction ridges of a finger. So our oldest known document containing a fingerprint is from 3rd century BC. And we believe that these people were using fingerprints as personal marks on clay tablets, sort of like a signature. And just before I go on, because they were using these fingerprints as a personal mark, they must have known the significance and the uniqueness compared to something that everyone has the same, or they wouldn't have been using it. They would have just used their signature. So going the whole way back to 1684, Dr. Grew is the very first person that we know to actually study fingerprints on a human hand. 1788, Johann Meyer actually determined that fingerprints are unique to each individual. So DNA is unique to each individual unless you're identical twins. Identical twins have the same DNA because they were split from the same egg. Fingerprints, however, are unique to every individual. So even identical twins do not have the same fingerprint. So for example, these are just two identical twins. You can see, let me get my pen here. Okay, you can see that this twin has what we call a loop. It starts on one side, it loops up and goes on the other side, goes out on the other side. This twin also has that kind of loop. But notice that this twin's core right here is very pointed, where this twin's core is very rounded. So, like I said, similar. They do both have loops, however, they're not exactly the same. And there are even more indicators if we looked at a more intricate level. In 1823, John Perkin actually discussed the distinct patterns of fingerprints, and he said that there were 9 distinct patterns. In 1856, Sir William Herschel actually began to register fingerprints that were used for identification purposes on paperwork. He began to file them, to keep them as records, to study them, to study the uniqueness between them. In 1902, Alfonso Bertillon's personal identification system that had been used up until this point, called anthropometry, was replaced by the more reliable fingerprinting. So anthropometry was basically where you take bodily measurements, and based on your age, your gender, your ethnicity, these bodily measurements could identify you if a body was found. However, fingerprints became more reliable because if you're the same height as somebody, or you're twin to somebody, or the same gender, or the same ethnicity, you look very similar, you may have similar anthropometry measurements. Fingerprinting was unique to every single individual. So Bertillon's identification system was great, it's all they had to use, but fingerprinting came around and it was way more reliable, much easier, and more accurate. In 1888, Sir Francis Galton actually verified that fingerprints do not change with age. So unlike your bones, as you grow, you change in height, your fingerprints start in a very early time when you're in uterine, and they do not change with age. Your fingers may grow, they may widen, but the pattern does not change. And then in 1900, Sir Edmund Richard Henry, who was working close with Galton, actually suggested to use fingerprinting for criminal identification. So he began to request fingerprints for criminals, and they created a modernized classification system of fingerprints. So one of the ways that we record and file fingerprints now is called a 10 card. It's just used, it's a piece of paper, and it just preserves a person's fingerprints. So if you're using the paper version, you actually print your fingers with ink, and on these top two lines, you have every individual finger, and you roll the print. So it's a very wide side-to-side, up and down version. The bottom is all 4 left fingers or all 4 right fingers straight down, and then the thumbs individually. So most of the time we find fingerprints like this, but these are nice because they show more details. Nowadays, they do this digitally, so they actually have like a scanner. Same idea, just different method. So fingerprinting in the United States. 1901 is when fingerprinting really started to pick up in the United States for practical use. So it was first used as civil service applications for those wanting a job in New York City. All the immigrants were coming in. In 1924, they actually began to take the existing fingerprint records and they merged all these things together to form a new recording system for the FBI. So the FBI now has the criminal record fingerprint and just generally everyday people that were used for job applications. So IAFIS, IAFIS is an acronym. It stands for Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System. Sometimes on crime shows they say AFIS. It just doesn't have the integrated on it. This was founded in 1999, and it's an FBI national database. Like I said, AFIS is just the non-FBI general name. IAFIS is the official. It's basically just a digital database of people's fingerprints. And when you pull up an unknown fingerprint and you want to compare it to a known fingerprint from the system, it uses scanners and computer technology to match up all these individual points. So for example, say that this is a unknown. This was picked up from a crime scene. They scan it into the computer and they find out that this fingerprint of a known person, maybe a criminal, maybe just someone who's had their fingerprints taken for a job, matches it. So the good thing about IAFIS, the FBI database, is it searches local, state, nationwide databases. And then it offers a very fast speed and accuracy for these matches. So it's no longer where you have to look through, local criminals first and then spread out from there. Everyone has 10 fingers. So you're talking about a huge number of files you have to look through. This offers a very quick speed and accuracy. Already, we have a new generation identification system that's replaced IAFIS. IAFIS is still around, but NGI is more common now in the FBI. It basically takes IAFIS, which is fingerprints, and also is now including palm prints, iris scans, which are your eyes, and facial recognition, along with other records. So it includes about 73 million fingerprint records, 5.7 million palm records, 8.1 million mugshots, and 8,500 iris scans. So it's just taking basically everything that we can possibly use to identify someone and putting it all in one database, which is kind of nice for finding criminals. The good thing about Next Generation is because it has all this information all together, it is helping us solve not only current cases, but cold cases. All right, so that is the history of fingerprints.